Welcome back to the Good, the Bad and the Ugly podcast with me, Tony Morell. This week's special guest is Jamie Hull, a former British Army reservist who survived a near-fatal plane crash. Jamie shares his incredible story of survival, resilience and recovery, detailing how he overcame life-changing injuries to reclaim his life. From the plane crash to his motivational work, Jamie's story is truly inspiring. Thanks for listening and watching this episode.
I was 63% third and fourth degree burns, and she brought me a mirror. I was a broken man, and I came back from the darkest depths of despair, but I was still able to go on and achieve some ambition that I had.
Welcome to the Good, the Bad and the Ugly podcast with me, Tony Morell, and this week's special guest is Jamie Hull, adventurer, veteran, motivational speaker, plane crash survivor. Your story is such a hard-hitting one, but your perseverance in life of never giving up is one that's such inspiring. Really looking forward to you sharing the Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Jamie, how are we?
Yeah, great, Tony. Thanks for having me on today. And I will say, first of all, Good, Bad and the Ugly. I do like the title of your podcast very much. Not sure where I fit into all that, and I'm hoping it's not the latter.
No, I'm the ugly one. I always say I'm the ugly one. We've just been here.
Yeah.
But listen, Jamie, thanks very much for coming on. I know you've done a couple of other podcasts and stuff, but we really wanted to get you on and we wanted to put our own spin on our own podcast. And, you know, your story is a hard-hitting one, but also it's an inspirational one because you're so strong in what you've had to go through in life and where you're at. And it just goes to show that you never, ever give up in life. And, you know, I seen you on a couple of other podcasts and I seen you on Lab Bible and stuff, and I thought I'd really love to have that gentleman on our podcast, and I just want to say thank you.
No, you're welcome. Good to be here.
So I just want to get into it, Jamie. You know, start from where you grew up, where you're from, family life and school life was like.
Well, I'm in London now, based in central London, but originally I grew up in a small market town called Leighton Buzzard in Bedfordshire. It was a pretty sleepy little haven back in those days. I'd actually come across from the backside of Luton. I don't mean that literally, but Stopsley, where my grandparents were. I sort of lived originally when I was a very young boy. But yeah, growing up in the market town in Bedfordshire, it was good. Youth was pretty ordinary. You know, I was quite lucky. It was a fairly sort of regular family upbringing until it wasn't for me. And it's not a sob story as such, but my parents separated when I was quite young. I mean, many parents do. That's not unique. But I was about 12 at the time.
Brothers and sisters, or?
Yeah, I had a younger brother, 10, and a younger sister even below that, which she was 6 at the time. So my sister went off with my mum. My mum moved away further to the north at the time. My sister and mum together. My brother stayed with me. And the difficulty for me really was that I suppose my youth, in essence, got cut short, because I then had a little bit of responsibility to sort of help my brother. And my father was there, but he was away working with work and, often away. And in those days, it wasn't such a big deal.
You had to do your own devices and sort of thing?
Yeah, because, I mean, I'm talking about realistically kind of late 80s,
like us all, we'd look after that.
Yeah, and so essentially I was largely unsupervised, which it felt maybe quite good to have the freedom, the independence. But, as the old saying goes, when the cat's away, mice will play a bit. And I was no exception to that. And I was this kind of wayward kid, really. I had a bit of a sort of maybe a rebellious streak within me for a period. And I kind of got up to no good. I got up to a bit of mischief. I actually got collared by the law on a couple of occasions. Mm-hmm. But, I should have been collared 1,000 times. My behaviour kind of went down a bit of a sticky path where, I was involved in perhaps shoplifting, a bit of criminal damage, perhaps a little bit of breaking and entering. And, you might feel like the big I am when you're a young kid that's getting up to no good and perhaps getting away with stuff.
Yeah.
But in essence, in truth, you're really not. You're really not doing yourself any good service or favour.
Did the police were they involved? And obviously, was your dad aware, or was it because you was away?
Yeah,
or?
on a couple of occasions it kind of came to light, but I kind of got collared. I got picked up for sort of misdemeanors, really. I think there was a bit of shoplifting, like I mentioned, maybe an act of criminal damage where I broke a load of windows on a greenhouse where I was throwing pebbles, and I couldn't hear the traffic sort of drowning out the noise of the broken panes of glass. And then the shoplifting was really trivial, where it was like, I don't know, a couple of packets of sweets or something
Something daft.
from the local kind of convenience shop. But in truth, I was up to kind of more and way kind of worse kind of stuff. Just, it was just, it wasn't, it got beyond sort of benign for me, and I was definitely going down a path. And trust me, if I'd have carried on with that sort of negative behaviour, I probably would have ended up in one place, and that would have been like a boys'
Youth offenders.
penitentiary,
Yeah, youth
like
offenders.
a Borstal type thing, because I was still underage. I was still like 12 plus years of age, and I didn't really kick myself into touch until I was about 16. And many people have said, "Well, what was the turning point? How did you manage to turn it around?" And I've said this before, but I became like the comeback kid, and that was because I got that in my case, dreaded brown envelope from school, and it was a GCSE results that summer. So sort of 4 years on from having parents split and me kind of thinking I was sort of taking charge of my own life and doing the right thing, and I really wasn't, getting up to no good, like I said. Got the results for 11, 12 years of schooling altogether, and it was dreadful. I think I got one GCSE to my name, and I was pretty mortified with that, I've got to be honest. But my grandfather at the time, who was quite a very strong influence in my life, and he was big into his kind of mathematics, and he was an engineer for British Aerospace. So he was quite an influence, although he wasn't in my life. They lived in a different town, in Luton, which at the time was 12 miles away. And he did have this, if you like, this orderly approach to trying to steer me in the right direction, to try to mentor me, to coach me, to talk to me. And when I got the results, he said to me, "Look, only you can do it. Only you can kind of get a grip of reality, and maybe, I know what you're getting up to, so to speak, and why you're kind of why this has occurred, why you're getting these kind of results at school." He said, "You can do better, but only you can do it."
Yeah.
And those words kind of resonated and echoed. And I just thought, you know what? Grandfather's right. If I don't kick myself, up the rear and pull the socks up, I'm probably going to go down this horrible road. And I was seeing peers go down that route.
Yeah.
And indeed, some of those guys even sort of graduated, as it were, and went on to serve sentences in prison. So, whether
That
it was
road or that road.
yeah, they went down the road of, I kid you not, of, serious organised crime. And that probably would have been me if I'd have carried on doing the things that I was doing. I was getting more confident and sort of cocksure in my younger self. And I was a bit of a leader as well. I could sort of influence my friends, but not necessarily in the positive, in the negative, to kind of be involved in stuff. And I knew that I had to kick myself into touch. And I did turn it around. And luckily it was not too little too late, as it were.
Yeah.
But it would have been me. And as I said, friends went down the road of, organised crime, or indeed dealing drugs type offences, that type of thing, stealing motor vehicles. It was just ridiculous, really.
Just getting involved.
And there's no way that I really wanted my path to take that negative. So I'm lucky that 16, 17, I managed to sort of get a grip on reality and start to toe the party line.
Yeah.
And that's what I would suggest.
So the career, was it like, was there obviously your granddad speaking to you and stuff and sort of giving you that talk that you probably needed? Was there a career that you wanted, a career path that you wanted to go down?
I think when you're young, when you're a kid especially, having strong mentors in your life, whether it's an older brother, whether it's a father, an uncle, a grandfather, just maybe somebody in the community, but to have strong older peers in your life to kind of help to coach you, to guide you, to make you see the light as a young kid. I was this young sort of tearaway, this bit of a rebellious streak, and thinking I knew better. And you don't. Not when you're 12, 13, 14 years of age. You don't know better. You're still very much learning the ropes in life, and you've got to find your feet. And I think I'm lucky that I had my grandfather. My father, to a degree, yeah, but he was away a lot working, so the supervision wasn't quite there. And of course, my mother was away at the time. So it's not a sob story. I mean, I'm probably, a lot of kids will probably listen to this and that will resonate with them because perhaps of what's going on in their own young life right now. But it's down to you as an individual to take a level of charge and shape your own life, even from a young age. You can do the right thing, you can take the right path, or you can choose to take the negative and the wrong path. But definitely peers, mentors will help you, to guide you, to steer you. And I'm lucky that I had that in my late grandfather.
I think kids today probably think peers and, you know, older generation, old school family members, they're just moaning at them, and they're not. They're just trying to guide them. I remember being a kid myself, and my aunties, my uncles, and, you know, even, you know, adults, you'd always have respect for your elders, and they're only trying to guide you down the right route, and you'd probably be like, oh, you know,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? And you think you know best, you think you know it all, and when it gets a bit what's name, and, you know, it gets a bit tough, where you think, oh, I shouldn't have really done that, and I'd only want what's best for me.
Yeah, and it's perhaps only when things start to come on top
Yeah.
and you're effectively, feeling your
Was you
collar
close
felt,
to
as it
really
were.
going like down the, like going to jail and stuff, or was you close to?
Well, I got a couple of cautions.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is the irony of my younger life, my younger self. I got a couple of what they call local box kind of, or local record sort of cautions. Luckily, it didn't get sort of designated and recorded on PNC, the Police National Computer, and therefore I wasn't sort of convicted.
You would have had a record, you mean?
But
So yeah.
for sure. But I mean, it was enough for me to kind of get the message. And I said, the results that came through with school exams and stuff like that, I just thought, come on, man, it's down to me. And Granddad was right, and I started to be more moralistic in my approach to my younger adulthood from that point onwards.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, I just started to get motivated. And I was a bit like Forrest Gump. You know, when he decided he wanted to go do something.
Yeah.
And there was that bit in the movie when he decides his girlfriend Jenny buys him the Nike, right? And he wants to go running. Well, I was a little bit like that. I mean, I did actually start to run as well.
Yeah.
But not as far as Forrest Gump. But no, I did. I used to get into running around 16, 17, and I was keen on athletics in school, and I played a bit of football, a bit of rugby, and so on. I think it was the sport that sort of saved me almost. And I got running in local area. I got stronger. I got fitter. I kind of had a bit of a talent for that. I was a bit of a young athlete, and that motivated me in turn. That inspired me, and then I guess I maybe started to kind of toe the line at school, and I wasn't in the back giving and receiving Chinese burns with my muckers in the back of the classroom and ignoring the teacher and playing up. I actually started to kind of tentatively listen to what the teacher had to say. And I ended up repeating a year at GCSE. And then I went on, got some results, went on and did A-level and so on. So that's kind of how the pattern started to turn in the positive for me.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of things, really.
So from there, did you go to uni or anything, or did
No,
you?
not straight away. I had the option. So I'd done A-levels, I got some reasonable results because I'd dug in for those kind of last 3 years doing repeat on GCSE and then A-level. And I did consider going off to university, but, I had a burning ambition to, in fact, see the world.
Go travelling.
Where that came from, I'm not entirely sure. I know that my grandfather, he trained as a pilot in the towards the end of the war, and so he'd seen a bit of the world. They'd been out to Australia as well, the family on my grandfather's side, and my dad even grew up for a period when he was a very young boy in Australia. So I was inspired by that story, and what was Australia like? Perhaps maybe I could go and see it myself, and then. My other grandfather on my mother's side was involved with the Navy. So he travelled far and wide, and he was even out in sort of Burma, Myanmar, and doing, kind of sort of various kind of operational bits and pieces around the world. So again, that inspired me. And maybe
Seeing the world,
it came from perhaps the ancestry there speaking. And so I remember it well. So I'd done odd jobs, and I did this job and I did that job. I worked in a supermarket. I worked on an outdoor market in the market town, Leighton Buzzard. I worked in a small factory that made parts for automobile industry, and I did some bar work as well. So all of these bits and pieces, in conjunction with my studies, my A-levels, I was busy, and I managed to save up some pennies. and I got enough cash generated, and I'm going back to sort of early 90s, and I probably saved about 6 grand, which in those days was a chunk of change.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
a good amount of money. But what I had planned to do with the money was quite ambitious. So the first thing I did was come down to London. I think it was like Knightsbridge. There was a Trailfinders shop. And I went in, spoke to one of the sales agents, and this lady sold me a round the world ticket. I still remember the price.
How much was
And
it?
this was in early 1995 by the time I'd got my act together, got the monies together, and I'd saved up over the few years. It was 1,086 quid.
For a what?
A round the world ticket. You'd barely get a flight back and forward to, the far side of the States for that now, during the summer season or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
It's things have gone up dramatically. It
Course,
just shows.
yeah.
But I got a flight, and the booking was something like London Heathrow to Johannesburg. Then the hop was going to be from later on was going to be from Joburg to Perth in Western Australia. Then the hop was Sydney to
Spend much
South
time in
Island,
these
New
places,
Zealand,
though.
North Island, Fiji, Hawaii, LA, and then the hop from Miami, Paris, London. Can you believe that? 1,080
Well, how much
pounds.
time do you get to spend in these places as well? I mean, how long do you stay there for?
Well, I did over a year, so that was the kind
So
of
was your
game
ticket
plan.
open? This is an open ticket, is it?
It was actually, yeah, it was an
So
open
you can
ticket.
just stay there for whatever duration of time in, like, say, Johannesburg,
Absolutely.
then Australia.
And from as I recall, it was open, so it would have quite a monetary value in today's kind
I was
of
going to say now,
market.
you,
Exactly. And I remember going down to South Africa initially, and I landed in Johannesburg, and I didn't know quite when I was going to leave, so it was a case of contact the airline, and I'd been there for several months, and I'd even worked down in a market in Camps Bay, selling like African arts and crafts, but that's another story. And I did all this weird and wonderful thing. I worked as a barman I was a cocktail barman, so black dicky bow tie, in the Bourbon and Beefsteak in Sydney. And if there's any Australian viewers, they'll know where I'm talking about, because it's like world famous.
Yeah.
In the heart of King's Cross. And I did some gardening random work in Florida, I think it was. And then, yeah, it was just a wonderful journey. But I mean, I did some wild stuff. South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Angola, Malawi. Angola, they had a civil war.
how was you getting from these
the
places?
time.
Was you hitchhiking and stuff, or was you...
Some hitchhiking. So I hitchhiked, for example, 2 times from Joburg, and it's like 800 miles, if I'm not mistaken, all the way down to Cape Town. I did that twice on the road, and I, maybe 5 or 6 lifts to get down there, from businessmen driving big fat 7 Series BMW to, they're only going so far, right? But maybe they've dropped me, and then I get a truck that picks me up. And one time I think I did it with a female, and a girlfriend at the time, and that was a bit easier, because they flash a bit of leg at the side of the road, and then I walk out from behind the bush, and they perhaps
She's a decoy, is she?
suddenly weren't so enthusiastic, but we got picked up and stuff like that, and I did that twice. I did the big journey twice over, all the way down to Cape Town. It's a long story, but I did this big round robin through Southern Africa. And ballsy, I mean, really ballsy.
I was going to say, in South Africa, you hear stories of, like, robberies and stuff like that, and attacks. Did that never cross you? I mean...
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you definitely take risks. I can remember being in a car with a couple that picked me up, and they were just non-stop drinking. If I remember, it was like Hunter's cider or something down there. They had like a caseload of it in the car, and they were like, "You want to drink some Hunter's, mate?" And I'm like, no, I'm good, mate. And he was like driving and drinking, and of course, you're aware of the danger, but listen, this was 1995. It's like practically 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So you are aware of the danger, but it's not so kind of frowned upon as what it is in today's kind of era.
Yeah.
But I took risks, and I perhaps did things that I'm looking back, it was definitely risque, and it was not necessarily the brightest thing to do. And if I had the time over, would I do those things? Probably not. No. But I'm glad that I had some of those younger,
experienced it, yeah.
in some cases gung ho, kind of overconfident experiences. But it was probably what was somewhat the making of me, the shaping of the younger version 1.0 of Jamie Hull. Before I became the kind of fully kind of shaped adult that I was. That was a big chunk of it, going around the world independently on my own, meeting a lot of people, having the odd relationship with, maybe girls that were traveling or whatever, or perhaps girls that I met overseas, and just meeting all sorts of good people.
Different people, yeah.
Business people to community people to, I met, people working in the bar, people working on the market, like colleagues in South Africa. And I even stayed with them, when I was down there. And I even met people in the dive industry because I worked up in the north as a young paddy dive master up in Cairns on the Great Barrier Reef. All 1995 going into 1996. So it was a joyous journey. I threw my hat in the ring with that trip. I really did. I put my best foot forward. I mean, I was responsible for my own welfare. And when I got sick, you got to take care of yourself. And that can be a scary place to be.
I can imagine.
And I remember getting food poisoning in Africa. And, I've got to nurture my well-being, nurture my health and get myself back to health and sort of claw myself back. And you're thinking, shit, am I going to die here, in deepest Africa? Because I picked up some gnarly gut sort of bacteria.
Yeah.
It happens.
It does, yeah. You see in these places.
And luckily I was a young fella and I could sort of bat it off. But, nevertheless, it's not a good place to be when you realise actually you're on your own and you don't have any...
The treatments is what we do have here as well.
Well, you don't have a partner to sort of necessarily to support you and
look after you.
There, sort of nurture you. It's on you. So if you get sick, you sort of... You realise that, you're pretty vulnerable as well, being on your own. You've got to take that into consideration. So I did all that, and as I say, it helped to shape me in the younger self. So I actually initially considered joining the Royal Marines. So I went for a test for that early on, and I managed to get through that process, and I passed it. This was the initial kind of like, check thing that they do. They look at you for a couple of days. But I then, it was only valid for so long, so I would have had to repeat that process, and I wasn't too happy about that. So then I had an opportunity to try something a bit different. And a friend of mine, I remember at the time, I came back from the year and so working, and a chum of mine at the time was an officer with Bedfordshire Police. He quite inspired me. He was a few years older. He told me a lot about what he got up to on a day-to-day basis and what the job was like, and this was quite ironic because, of course, my younger years that I described.
Yeah.
And I made a phone call. He gave me the number. They weren't recruiting, but they said to me on the phone, and I quote, they said, look, where do you live? And I told them I lived in this market town. And they said, well, that's on the border, Leighton Buzzard. And it just up the road is Wing. And that's the border for Thames Valley. And it's a different police force. And I'm like, really? I was quite naive.
So you want to join the police? You wanting to?
Yeah, I was looking at that, and then they said, well, here's the number. We're not recruiting right now, but we believe they are. So I rang the Thames Valley number. Anyway, fast forward, it was about a year's process, and I'd gone through the hoops, and I was in the job. I got sort of selected for the job, and I was quite young. I was a very young.
How old were you when you joined the
PC.
police?
So I was only like 21 when I was going through that recruitment process. So. And I'd, like I say, I'd been around the world and doing what I was doing. And I think that was probably what impressed them.
Yeah.
That I'd shown the courage and the kind of determination to do all of that largely on my own. And they'd sort of asked me about what I'd got up to. And I said, look, I was a diver in the north and blah, blah, blah in Australia. And I remember having to give presentations. And I gave a presentation about, some scuba diving mask or whatever and the benefits of the mask because, it allows you to focus and seals around your face and protects you and blah, blah, blah. And it was things like that. They were quite impressed that I'd taken the initiative. I'd done some travel. I'd had sort of position of responsibility as a dive master out there. And as they put it, because I declared the background with cautions. I mean, why wouldn't you? Because chances are if they look at that and that you haven't declared it, you probably get binned from the process.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I actually did declare it. I declared caution for criminal damage, caution for theft, like shoplifting.
You were just honest.
I was honest, right? Yeah. And they questioned it. I remember this little old lady superintendent with the glasses on the bridge of her nose, and she questioned it. And she said, how can we trust you now with your criminal records? And I said, look, I have to just say, look, that was me, and I definitely was me a few years ago, and I was up to no good, and I was a naughty like so and so, but I did manage to, reform my young self, and that's not me anymore. I said, so you just need to give me a chance.
Yeah, yeah.
And as they put it, when I finally got the kind of verdict for the job, they said, we're prepared to take a chance on you. And I thought that was really a nice thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it just goes to show, again, really message for younger viewers maybe, just because you've had a bit of strife or you've perhaps got into a bit of trouble,
Doesn't mean it's
you
over.
don't need to allow that to dominate your path going forward for the future. You can turn it around, and there are opportunities still out there for you, and you've got to believe in that.
Don't let it hold you back, and
Yeah.
you got to own it and just listen. It is what it is. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of children today do think that, they make a mistake in life and it's game over, and it's not.
Absolutely. I mean, and people make mistakes and people get themselves into hot water or perhaps getting with a bad peer group
Yeah.
or whatever. But you can turn it around. The question is, how much do you want something? How hungry are you for a process? And if you can learn to believe in yourself, learn to believe there's a better path. And trust me, you'll always get on better in the world, because I've been on sort of both sides.
Yeah.
All right, I wasn't a career criminal, but I did some pretty gnarly sort of bad
course,
stuff
yeah,
when I was younger. And I know from experience that the better path is the way to go. Getting sort of gainful employment and earning a few quid your own way, by your own
honest
steam.
living and stuff like that, innit? It's like,
Yeah.
you're not looking over your shoulder,
Absolutely.
Listen, I know people do what they've got to do, and that's
Yeah.
their decisions that they've got to live with.
And looking back, trust me, I would have rather been working in a supermarket for virtually minimum wage, which I did, or on the markets on the street in the market town in Leighton Buzzard, or doing paper rounds, or working in that little factory for a little while.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and earning not great money, but I was earning money all the same, and it was adding up, over the course of time. Rather than being on the street, getting recruited by some county lines dealer to sell stuff to my colleagues at school. Do you get what I'm saying? They're probably going to pay you the same kind of money, yeah, as an incentive, but believe me, that's going to lead to like all sorts of bother.
When it all comes crashing down, and it just goes tits up, which it always does.
Yeah.
And
I also know for a fact, the reason I mention that, because there's a big problem with that in the UK, whether it's up north or down south or in London.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere, and it's a big problem, and it's been led by gangs, often sort of overseas sort of immigrants, really are driving a lot of that. And kids can be smart enough to make their own choices, and it's up to them.
I think what it is now, though, Jamie, is that they see the pound signs, and sometimes, it's not always the way where they could be earning, I don't know, 100 quid a day, 150 quid a day, cash. They're doing it 7 days a week, whatever they do.
Sure.
And then the next thing, they're under surveillance, they're being watched.
Yeah, but is it worth it if they get collared? Is it worth it if they get potted?
Exactly.
They've got a conviction, they've got a criminal record. Their younger lives are then going to be frankly screwed. And then it makes it very, very difficult to make that a real positive transition into anything that's remotely sort of productive for them going forwards. So, all I'm saying is people have got choices, right? We've all got choices.
Of course they have. But in the police force, Jamie, how long did you serve in the police?
So I did a number of years. I was with Thames Valley Police altogether sort of 5 years.
And from PC, did you move up, or was it just always?
No, I was only a PC, so humbly police constable. But I did sort of specialise. I was on a police support unit, and I was a medic as well within the sort of the umbrella of that
Must
unit.
have seen some.
So I did all sorts of things, from human rights protests outside the sort of laboratories in Oxford, to demonstrations regarding possible new developments close to where residents were living, whether it was like big housing estates or business developments coming up, and residents were up in arms. It sounds a bit, almost sounds a bit comical, but sometimes it got a bit shirty. There were big football matches.
you have to
between sort of Oxford and, if I remember rightly,
Cambridge, is it?
No, Reading and perhaps Cardiff and stuff like that.
Big,
Yeah, they were fairly big games. They weren't like Premier League, but big
Well,
sort
there'd
of
be disorder and stuff going
yeah,
on.
where passions and tensions were high, and then we were often drafted in.
You have to
And
wear
I was
all the
part
gear
of a
and all
very
that.
very active PSU, so I roved all over the Thames Valley. So Thames Valley for the viewers would have been, or rather is, Buckinghamshire in the north, Oxfordshire, and the Royal County of Berkshire in the south.
Yeah.
So it's a big area.
It's a big count. Is it a county?
Yeah,
It's a
big area. I
county,
mean, it's
isn't it?
like 5,000 officers. There's a lot going on, and I was just one of those. And but we were busy, and especially with my role on police support unit, I was a very active young PC doing what I was doing. And when I was on shift, it was basically chasing the nines. So it was 24-hour rapid sort of rotational shift pattern, earlys, late nights, and I was dealing with all manner of emergencies, and I was thereby collaring those young Herberts that were out doing the shoplifting and the criminal
Exactly,
damage.
going back to, yeah.
But I was able to have a strong word in their ear and say, look, I was there. You need to get your act together. So it was good. I felt cliche, but I made a small difference for a
Yeah, of
period.
course. Yeah, you've lived it and you're trying to help them as
Yeah.
the mistakes that they've made. So when did it come to a point where you thought, I want out? I was just...
Well, listen, I did love the job, really. I enjoyed it. There wasn't a dull moment. You go into that work, you go into the crew room and you get briefed and you're straight out, in the car doing what you're doing. So there was never a dull moment, but it was a case of having been around the world in the fashion that I described earlier, and I'd seen so much of the world. I'd had so many great opportunities already. Particularly it was the diving. The diving was a massive hook. By now, I'd actually been back over to Egypt and back to the UK. And when I was in Egypt, I'd embarked on a very comprehensive training process to become a PADI scuba diving instructor. So I was now qualified to teach. And that was a massive draw because I simply made some inquiries at the time. And I remember going in to speak to like one of the bosses at work. I think it was inspector on the shift, chief inspector, and said, look, I've heard that you can take a sabbatical, an official career break.
Yeah, yeah.
I would like to do that. And he questioned it. He said, why do you want to do that? And I said, listen, I'm enjoying the job immensely. There's great opportunities.
Yeah.
There's opportunities for me now to go on to mounted section. I was young. I was very athletic. I was quite a lightweight
Physically,
officer.
yeah, you felt...
Like 11.5 stone or whatever, like soaking wet. So I would have been good for, say, mounted section. They had a strong mounted section with the horses. And because I'd been very strong, remember, on the PSU, the police support unit, or what the public might term riot squad, because I'd been so active in that department, they were interested in sort of recruiting me. This was mounted. So I had that option, but that pull to go alternatively off in the world and do my diving while I was young and while I was hungry for that was too much of a draw. So I spoke to the inspector. He said, okay, well, I understand why you want to do it, definitely. You've got the qualification. So I actually took a cut in money, as it were, and I went off to work in Egypt and earned, 50% of what I was earning back home to work as an instructor in the dive industry. And I got a job in places like Hurghada in Sharm el Sheikh, working for a big commercial company called Emperor Divers. And I'm working in the Red Sea, and I'm working in like 30, 40 meters depth of water, teaching, crystal clear, hammerhead sharks.
I was about to say sharks.
Not bad,
and stuff. Yeah.
I mean, it was a far cry from, paperwork and
In the police, stuff.
flying around, blues and twos with the lights and sirens in Thames Valley. And listen, I was young. For me, that was an adventure, right, to get back out there in the world. And anyway, fast forward, but I got headhunted, as it were, because I put my name forward, and I got picked up for a role to manage an expedition in the Philippines, which was a conservation expedition for a London-based company called Coral Key. And that was fun. I mean, I went and worked in very, very remote, like Robinson Crusoe type island in the middle of the South China Sea. And it was like 2 days to get there. And I remember flying out on the Millennium, like literally.
Yeah.
So I flew out literally on New Year's Day after the big party and so on. And there I was, I went via I don't think it was the Middle East. I hopped from Dubai down to Manila in the Philippines, then down to a place called Palawan. And then from Palawan, I had to take a bus through the jungle, 3 hours, and then like a 3 hour Filipino banca, which is one of these chug, 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 with the outriggers, 3 hours across the South China Sea to get to Cagdanao Island. And that was the adventure. 5 months later, I left the island. And I was only supposed to be there for 3 months. But they collared me for another month, and I did an extension, then another one. They kept asking me, and then finally I said, after 2 extensions, I said, no, I'm done. Because it was just purely voluntary. But what an adventure. Yeah. I mean, I worked in this tiny island that was literally inhabited with rats, pythons. They would literally, you'd wake up and perhaps one of the young volunteer girls, one of the young students or whatever, would suddenly be screaming in the dead of night, and I'd get woken up or whatever. I think, what the hell's going on? And I'd walk over there because I was the exped lead, and find out what was going on. I had a couple of other staff, and there was a bloody great python wrapped round the rafters. This is in some random island in the middle of the South China Sea in the Philippines. That's what it's like. And there was lots of rats. We had to cull the rats approximately every 3 to 4 weeks.
How big were the rats?
So we had to bait them, put them in a cage and drown them basically, or send a little Filipino up there with a machete to hack them down. And they could get like yay big, the little juveniles, and in some cases they were like that, jungle rats. Oh. I mean, big pythons would be like that wide in the rafter, like 10 feet long. Monitor lizard. Monitor lizards can get quite gnarly as well. They can get a little bit aggressive, so they come round looking for scraps and food and all the rest of it.
That would be no good on that.
Amazing bird life, amazing marine life in underwater. But it was an incredible place. And then completely randomly, we had a BBC film crew out there, and I kid you not, it's on YouTube. It's immortalised on YouTube. Ray Mears' Desert Island Survival. You can Google it. And I played the downed airman. I played the downed pilot, which was another story, obviously, later on.
Yeah.
But I actually played the part as a reconstruction actor for the BBC. They just happened to be there. They came out. And they asked me if I'd be willing to play the part, and I was a bit, nervous about it because I'd never done anything like that. And they sort of guided me through the process, and I ended up playing the part as a reconstruction actor. True story, yeah.
That's madness. So obviously, what we're going to get to and stuff. But so when you came out from the island, when you left, where did that path take you?
So I finished in the Philippines. I came back to the UK, and then bizarrely. Because I did this in a completely roundabout way, I actually went off to university. So I did it all myself. I applied through the UCAS system for university application. And I got a place at UEA, which is the University of East Anglia in Norwich, so in the southeast of the country. And you know what? I mean, I wanted to go to university, but I didn't really give a rat's hoop in terms of what I was going to study. Because I was an older student, I was considered a mature student at 25 years of age now. And, obviously the world was my oyster, so to speak. And because I'd travelled so much, I figured, languages degree might be quite fun to do. And then you go and get to live in that country.
Yeah.
So I was always guided by this kind of inner kind of passion, rather than, perhaps driven by what the expectation was and what the normal people tend to follow the path, whether it was accountancy or law or something like that. So I just figured I'd like to do a languages degree. Why? Because I love travelling so much. And I maybe get to go and live in Norway if I do this language. So I did Scandinavian languages, like BA Honours, it was, at Norwich. And, no real regrets. I mean, unless I'm living in Norway, it's probably about as useful as a chocolate fireguard. But it was a fun degree to do.
Yeah.
And I did get to fulfil the ambition to go live there. So I lived there in my second year. And I worked and played out there in the mountains, doing a sort of an outward bound type adventure, doing skiing and mountaineering to scuba diving. I even took my kit out there and I was diving sort of crazy, like 60-metre dives in the fjord, through the ice in the middle of winter, all this stuff. But probably what I wanted to share was that at the same time, so when I did sign up for this gig, as it were, at university, and that was a 4-year program for me, 4-year degree, including the year overseas. I actually joined the army. How the hell did that happen? So I walked along they have the freshers fair, right, at the start of the college kind of semester. And I walked along and there was all these different stands. There was people trying to sell this group or this sports group or that club from field hockey to tiddlywinks. And then there was some military type stands. And there was one guy who was like this tash, bristling NCO.
Still though, yeah.
In the green combat 95 at the time, army fatigues, the uniform, and the shiny bald boots. You know, his toe caps were like, you could see your face in his toe caps, kind of thing. And he was there. And I remember he was quite short, stocky guy. Lovely gentleman, actually. And I remember, I still remember him to this day. He was a black guy, but he had a big moustache and big sideburns. And he pointed his finger sort of Kitchener style. You know, that poster from World War II, your country needs you.
Yeah, yeah.
He was a bit like that. He pointed his finger at me and said, you look like material for the OTC. And I'm like, OT what? And he said to me, explained it. He said, it's Officer Training Corps. He said, it's part of the university. He said it's we have one down the road, Cambridge University OTC, and Norwich forms like 50% of that. And he said, you look like a young, sort of fit, motivated individual. Maybe you're interested. Let me tell you some more. And so I got talking to him, and he was a lovely guy, actually, and he sort of sold it to me. He said, look, we go away, we train with the army, so you might do familiarisation visits, you go and check out this regiment or this corps, you go and stay in the officers' mess, eat nice food, and what we'll even pay you for going away on the weekend, so that can help sustain you through university. And I thought, look, some great incentives.
Yeah.
Because obviously 4 years was a long time. There was a lot of bills I had to pay with accommodation and gas and electric and blah, blah, blah. So I thought, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. Plus, maybe it distracts me from not always jumping into the student union bar on a Friday, Saturday night, because I've got nothing better to do, right, on campus. So there was a number of incentives, and it was brilliant. I ended up really enjoying what the army had to offer. And then I found the training really quite inspirational. And then some highlights would have been, I did a couple of Cambrian patrol, which were these gnarly sort of army patrolling competition across darkest Wales. And the weather was typically horizontal because it's like, November and it's coming at you,
it's grim,
it's Wales in the winter. It's not fun. It really isn't. But, there was something in me that I found that switched on when the going got tough. And I sort of really came alive. And I suddenly was the life and soul of the patrol. And I was there sort of, lifting my sort of comrades in the patrol and motivating them. And we did that to each other, right?
You're a leader, really, aren't you? You know what I mean?
But sometimes if I noticed that maybe one or two guys in the patrol were a bit down or struggling, I would sort of really step up and kind of come out of my shell, as it were, to want to really motivate them and encourage them. And I found that there was a real driving force in me when stuff got tough in the army. And I really wanted to succeed, and I really wanted to help pull that team along. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the Cambrian patrols, and then I got an opportunity to also select for parachute regiment. I put myself forward for that, which was kind of, not many cadets did that.
Yeah.
Because I was a bit older, a bit more mature, perhaps knew my own mind and body, I suppose. I did the P Company process, which is a pre-parachute regiment selection course at Catterick in North Yorkshire. And it was pretty horrible, if I'm honest. Very high speed. Tough. I mean, maybe only about 15%, 20% of guys actually succeed, I think, on P Company, I think statistically. So we started out with a program of about 150 guys or whatever. And believe me, there was only a dozen or so that got the stand-up pass at the end of it all. And that was me. But it's not a boast. It was a case of, I just surprised myself. I came through it. Yeah. I gave it my absolute all in that process. And I was beaten up black and blue by the end of it. By the time we'd done the test week and the time I'd finished the milling, and I'd gone toe-to-toe with my opponent, and then they made me fight again because the first guy was a bit of a mismatch and I won the fight a bit maybe too easily. They put me in with this gnarly guy who was like probably like you, but even bigger. Yeah. And he had this big hooked, broken looking nose. So I thought clearly he's pretty tasty. He can handle
You can
himself.
have a go, like,
He's
yeah.
going to hurt me, and he did. But luckily, I switched on to it. I kind of rose to the occasion, the adrenaline, whatever, and I gave it my all in that
And you
final
come through
scrap. So there's him clutching his, possible kind of fractured rib at the end of it, and I'm like literally clutching my skull with like concussion. It was that severe, and I'm beaten black and blue, from everything, from the milling, from all of the trainasium that we'd done, like the high level kind of obstacle course, all the big squad runs where you've been run within an inch of your life with heavy packs and rifles and everything, and literally. And without sort of going into too much detail, but just to give you an idea, I mean, you've got the physical body shape, and you've got your kind of your sort of your shape and your backside that sort of emanates, as it were, in the shape of a man. Well, I practically lost my backside. It just ate itself in terms of digestion, because you burn up so much body fat, you start burning muscle. And I remember that my body was just thin as a rake. I was just this kind of thin streak of whatever by the end of it. But I'd narrowly got through, and I got a stand-up pass, and at least that's what it felt like. And I felt overjoyed to get through that process. And it perhaps cemented, the level of determination that I was as a younger man.
You knew how far you could go, and
I knew the boundaries that I could
Yeah.
push, and I knew what I was capable of. And anyone that's been through that process, I mean, hats off to them, because it's probably, arguably the toughest selection in the British Army.
is that where? So from there, was that where you sort of wanted to fly planes and stuff, or
Well, I did a bit more with the forces. So I actually then got a kind of recommendation for trial for UK Special Forces. I did go on and do that process. Bit of a different process, a bit slower, a bit steadier. Still horrible, still tough. But for me, I found it a bit easier. And it wasn't easy by any means, but
some of the stuff that you've endured?
I guess I held on. I was a bit like a dog with a bone. I wouldn't let go. I wasn't going to quit. Having done P Company, I think that helped a lot. And I'd done Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, and learnt a lot about myself and what it is to kind of step up and hold on. And then finally with the SF, or the Special Forces program, that was a long road. That was like over a year. And again, I just surprised myself. Basically, I came through that and got badged. And then I realised that there was a role to play. So I was with the squadron for a number of years, doing what I was doing, and going around the world and really kind of experiencing some very interesting sort of operational training deployments globally.
Yeah.
So all different environments, from jungle to Arctic to temperate in Europe to mountain and desert as well. So we went all over, and that was the beautiful thing about it, because I was drawn to that again because I was a man that liked travel. Right?
Yeah, I was about
and I
to
loved
say
to
that.
have new opportunities, and they did take me far and wide. And so I was badged into 21 SAS, and I was doing that process, as I mentioned, for about 5 years altogether with the squadron. And then I had the ambition to fly. So that again goes back to my late grandfather, and as I mentioned, he trained as a pilot when he was younger, and he often, when I was a kid, he would literally sit me on his knee and talk to me about all things like aeronautical, all things space. Because remember, he worked for British Aerospace Engineering,
Aerospace,
so his thing was like missiles and so on and so forth. But he was a massive inspiration to me. We'd have conversations about deepest space, or about Concorde, and about the power to weight and thrust dynamics of Concorde, because he kind of had this boffin sort of brain. He was what I call a spotter. You get train spotter?
He was a plane spotter.
Exactly. So as a young kid, he took me to the perimeter fence at Luton Airport. I'm there looking through the wire mesh fence with the broken binocular, and my little brother had the other half.
Concorde.
And my grandfather had the Gucci new pair. And then we're spotting, we're looking at planes, and he's telling me what so-and-so plane is, and this and that. And I'm listening as well, and I'm taking it all in. But moreover, I'm witnessing, so I'm watching the big boys, like the commercial pilots, throttling up and doing their sort of RPM checks pre-flight, powering up the engines, testing the jet engines, and the noise and the backwash of that kerosene fume,
Yeah.
sort of filling my young nostrils at the time, was quite formidable. And anyway, I was inspired, and of course I grew up with this, right? And so one day I thought, when I'm old enough and I perhaps can fund it, I'll put my money where my mouth is, like I always tried to do that, and just execute and go do. Basically,
become
if
a
I have an
pilot,
ambition, I
yeah.
want to go do, not just kind of talk about it. So I went off to America. Actually, I chose to go to US, having considered the weather systems over there. I know it's not great right now. They've got Hurricane
Yeah, in
Milton
Florida,
sweeping in as we speak. God forbid. But at the time, I was, looking at that summer period. So that was the summer of 2007, and I'm going back a few years, obviously.
Yeah.
But there was a good chance that within a short period, a short time frame, I was likely to succeed with
Get your licenses.
the training program and not get rained off like I would typically in the UK. So that's what that was all about. And I went to the US Embassy, convinced them that I wasn't a threat
He wasn't like a
post
terrorist.
9/11, right? So I had to go through a series of interviews. They gave me the visa, off I went. I fast forward, I'm like 1 month into the course, everything was hunky dory. I'd been training with various different US flight instructors and everything was great. And I'd been now solo for I think it was 8 days in total solo. And I always remember, and one of the US flight instructors said to me, and I quote, he said, "Look, he said, above all, if you've got a problem and there's an emergency, fly the damn aircraft." And we're talking about emergency flight drills or whatever at the time.
Yeah.
And we're just practicing that, right? We're doing it dry in the air, and we're kind of we're doing the sort of shutdown and the glide and all the rest of it. And I had some good instructors over there, pretty motivated guys, and we were doing all of the sort of the regular training. So we were doing sort of slow speed stalls and maneuvers, and we were doing sort of go arounds and touch and goes in the pattern, and then flying from small municipal airports, Alpha to Bravo to Charlie, and then back to Alpha, the main aerodrome, and all that kind of stuff. So just to put you in the spotlight, on this one particular day, it was the 19th of August 2007, I'd been up in the morning, done what I'd done, and I'd been out from Aerodrome A Alpha, like 10 kilometers to B Bravo, and I'd come back again into A Alpha. I'd landed, and I'd sort of taxied back in, had a break, had some lunch, checked the radar, spoken to the management there of the flight center and everything. Got my permissions to go back up in the afternoon.
Control and all that.
Weather was looking good. Everything was kind of was good to go. And then after lunch, I'd had some refreshment, gone back out, and as I'd gone out and I'd checked the aircraft over as you do each time. So check the condition of the wings, the flaps, the ailerons, the tires. For the landing gear, making sure the aircraft's airworthy, everything was all good. And then I'd gone out and I'd taxied, once I'd done various sort of checks within the aircraft as well. I'd taxied back out and I'd gone full throttle down that centre line, taken off again. And I'm working within the local pattern of this aerodrome where I was based, and this was in southern Florida. So it was hot, it was stinking hot. Humid as well, and everything had started out really quite well, and I'd done a few go arounds within this pattern, and I suddenly was at altitude again, and I'm over 1,000 feet indicated on altimeter, and I remember looking out my left-hand canopy window, and I saw this really quite direct, thin streak of visible yellow-orange flame. And I looked at that, and I sort of looked again. I did a double take, thinking, "Shit, is that what I think it is?" And I really had to sort of focus. And in the little slipstream coming from the one of the sort of side ducts of the fuselage of the front of the aircraft, it was clearly being driven out, this bit of flame from the left-hand side. And then as I'd made, so I'm downwind at that stage, and I'd come crosswind left banking, then left banking into wind. As I made that final turn into wind, and I'm obviously controlling the aircraft coming round, I looked down at feet on the rudder pedals, so left and right, and my feet suddenly were being breached by the flame that had now encroached the the small cockpit down below. So in
fear.
other words, I've got flame lapping around my feet and ankles suddenly. So it's come from outside to inside just like that.
Jamie, the fear, I can't even start to understand, you know, the fear you must have felt,
Initially, I did have fear. I did have panic going on in my mind. And all I'm thinking about was, Jesus, God, I've got to get this aircraft down. I've got to get this aircraft down. And my mind was actually like racing. It was just racing.
the adrenaline, everything you must
Yeah,
have.
and if you will, it was a bit of I was aware of the panic. So in my chest, the heart was like thumping. The adrenaline was obviously spurting with the heart, and I got that adrenal sort of response going off. Heart was thumping. My breathing rate was hyperventilating and
But also you got
elevated.
the flames as well.
Well, it didn't. It started low, but I'm now panicking, thinking I've got to get this aircraft down. Cockpit is starting to is ablaze, and it's building. So as I'm descending, I'm literally watching altimeter spin down from like 1,900, 800, 700 feet, and I'm trying to head down to the threshold point for the runway as hastily as I could, and I'm trying to make a track to get down there and just bring the aircraft in the conventional sense, in the normal sense.
But while this is going on, you've got flames,
So the problem being, when I got to about 500 feet indicated, the flame was about halfway up in the chamber of the cockpit, and I've got nowhere to go, nowhere. So at that stage, it just came to me like a sort of a light bulb sort of epiphany moment. And I knew what I had to do. I knew what I was going to do. So I just flicked back, if you will, to what the US flight instructor had always said, fly the aircraft. So I maintained the control. I tried to stay as calm as I could, but I still had that sort of fluster going on.
Course,
and I'm
yeah.
trying to get a grip of the situation. And I keep my left hand on the control stick, right hand on the throttle. I systematically just did the protocol. So I've turned the key to the ignition off, the magnetos, red switches, that is, Alpha and Bravo off, the master switch off, the lights off, the strobes off, the fuel pump off, and the fuel to selector valve rotate through 90 degrees off. Just follow the dashboard left to right. It's a drill that I practiced many, many times over, so I didn't forget. And quite low level, but I was able to remove my headset and throw it in the opposite footwell, open the left-hand canopy door, which went up to the vertical position and now gave me a good opening. And then also unbuckle my three-point harness in the left-hand seat that I was sitting in. And I'm very, very low level, so I've glided right down, and I'm literally 50 feet, 40 feet, 30 feet, 20 feet over some grass. And at 20 feet, I was literally like a hasty sort of jackrabbit. I managed to clamber quickly onto the seat, climb through over the door lip here to my left, onto the left wing, and I just went for it. So meaning I got onto the wing momentarily, and just to get my balance momentarily, and then I just took a giant leap from the back of the left wing, snapped the feet and knees together in the air, hands above my head, in this kind of position. And all I was doing there was simply a good old-fashioned army parachute exit position. And again, something that I'd done probably hundreds of times over with the course of the work and the service that I'd done with the army.
So remember all that though, Jamie? You're in an aircraft.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
called fire, and
yeah.
you're switching all switches off.
Yeah.
You're trying to.
Well,
how
two
does that? How do you do
Two
that?
things. It was an emergency. There was no two ways about that. So it was like, okay, emergency protocol. I'm going to go through that procedure, boom, 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 and pull that off and sort of execute the emergency procedure, which is what I did to close down the engine controls, etc. And then the second thing was, for me, exit procedure. And exit procedure, fell back to my service. I mean, I'd done countless sort of jumps from moving aircraft and trained as a very highly trained paratrooper with my role with UK Special Forces. So I pulled it off by the skin of my teeth, and I managed to get out of there by the skin of my teeth. But in truth, the damage was done. So little did I realise that in the action of that jump, I had just inadvertently ruptured my colon. That's the large intestine, ruptured. And I'd also lacerated in the force of the jump hitting the ground at speed,
Impact, yeah.
the left flank of my liver, which was now bleeding, hemorrhaging internally. So internal injuries from the force and the tear. Also, my index finger on contact with the ground, this left hand, hyperextended and fractured. Okay, 2 ribs are on impact with the ground because my hand above my, and I thrust forward, my whole torso hitting the ground. A couple of ribs I fractured, clavicle, collarbone fractured. Supraorbital eye socket fractures above both eyes, fractured. Nose bone fractured. The worst of it, though, for the record, I was 63% third and fourth degree burns. And that meant over 63% of total body surface area if I was naked, right? And also, fourth degree burns was an aspect of my shin area where the bone was literally down to the tibia.
So it's exposed,
bone.
basically.
The shin bone, yeah. So, in other words, both shin bone aspects were effectively burned through, and the bone was exposed. Because remember, that's where the fire started.
In the footwell.
In the low region of the cockpit. So my lower limbs got the longer section of burn compared to my upper body and my face, which took some nasty burn, but mainly my right side of my head got burned. When I got out onto the left wing, I turned to the left and I was receiving the backwash of the propeller all across the right-hand side, so the wind from the back of the propeller. And that's what fanned it all the way down the right-hand side in those last moments, which was a nasty, horrible burn, but the shin was the worst. And I had very serious surgery, pioneering surgery from doctors in America. And to give people an indication of what I was up against, in 2007, so 17 years ago now, the bill was just shy of 2.8 million US dollars. They did a lot for me. So I had a total of 64 medical surgeries over a period of 7 years, but I was in hospital for the first 2 years, including 6 months drug-induced in Florida, in Orlando Regional Health Center, having been airlifted from the scene with a helicopter. And I remember distinctly the doctor, "Hey man, I'm Dr. Smith. I'm going to take good care of you. Can you confirm your name?" I told him my name. "Can you confirm your date of birth?" I told him. "Do you have an insurance policy?" I'm not joking. That was question number 3. And you know why? Because I told you what the bill was. So what they did for me was second to none.
Yeah.
Private medical care, 24/7, round the clock. Without that intervention, well, we certainly would not be having this conversation. And I'm a very lucky chap that 2 things. I managed to get out on the day and pull it off by the skin of my teeth, or bacon, literally. And the emergency medical response that I got and what they subsequently did for me in the hospital, etc., with all the doctors and nurses.
Jamie, explaining that is like something, you'd see on a film, or, real life. It's just like sitting here listening to it. It's like, it's so hard, it's scary. But you say, like, then you're in the hospital and stuff, and when the doctor's asking you your name and all that, can you believe that you're still alive?
Well, to be fair, I mean, if I just turn the clock back a little bit, so when I arrived on the back of the helicopter, little did I know, but I was blind from the reaction to the burn to the cornea of both eyes. Yeah. So my eyes had reacted, I couldn't actually see. And so can you imagine what my mental state was? I knew that I was burned really badly. I knew that it was severe 3rd-degree burn over much of my body.
And you've got other injuries as well internally, but obviously
I didn't know about all that. I just knew that I had
the pain. You must feel the pain.
I didn't know quite what the detail of the medical prognosis was at the time, and the damage. But I knew it was bad. And again, the irony was, I had highly trained as a patrol medic with my unit with 21 SAS. So I'd been to the medical cadre with my training with UK Special Forces Group. I'd been down to Basingstoke Hospital at the time, and I'd sort of masqueraded as a junior doctor back in the day, and I'd learnt what I'd learnt as a patrol medic, and got qualified. So I knew what serious third-degree burns meant to the human being, to the human body, and I knew that, my God, it had just happened to me. I mean, my God, the mental state was rock bottom. And I remember saying to the doctors in Orlando, look, for God's sake, just help me out here. Just put me out of my goddamn misery. I don't want this. Whatever it takes, I'll sign the papers. I'll sign on the dotted line. And I was very pragmatic. I was very matter of fact, because I knew what had just happened to me. And I knew that in all sincerity, my life was never going to be the same again. You get burned like that, and as far as I was concerned, remember, I was burned, I was blind. You don't want it. You don't want it. I mean, trust me. I'd gone from being that guy. Like I was badged. You know, I was badged Special Forces, to now ground zero human being, lowest ebb. And how the hell do you come back from that? Do you even want to? No. There's no way I wanted to come back from that. I didn't even want to fight. I just said to them, just put me out of my misery. And they went off and they had some conversations, and they were considering it by all accounts. But somebody made a protest, and it's very much, if people are interested, it's in the deeper narrative of my story, Life on a Thread. But it's all there. It's all there in the book. But it's a very hard-hitting sort of process that I went through that day.
We'll put your book in the description.
For sure. But I won't talk about it all now, because it will sort of delve too deep. But the point is, somebody made a protest. Somebody was like my guardian angel,
looking over you.
Absolutely, and trust me, I didn't want it. Not as an individual, I did not want that moment
was that
in time.
Straight away after it, or was it months and months?
Sorry, but I will say the rest is history. Somebody protested. They took me down, and that was it. They started the process of effectively rebuilding me, like, might as well be the $6 million man. It just went on and on and on. And I was there for 6 months. Then I was in hospital for 2 years altogether, with hospitals in the UK between Chelmsford, Stoke Mandeville, East Grinstead, Chelsea and Westminster, Cambridge. It just went on and on and on.
And was there times, Jamie, did it get to a time when you obviously you needed to look at yourself in the mirror? Did you feel?
Yeah.
How was that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Many people are curious about that. I mean, you go through such like massive metamorphosis, massive change. And, it's a bit like, dare I say, a bit like the sort of caterpillar to the butterfly. But in my case, it was probably felt like the other way around, right? And it was such tremendous change that I went through. And I've said this before, but 3 years of physical healing because of the wounds closing up. Because at first, most of my back, my right shoulder, my scalp resembled like a pork chop, the type that before you slap it on the grill, so it was like red raw. Yeah, and then literally, that process took a very long time to heal, and then I'd say 5 years mentally before I'd fully sort of accepted it. I mean, I went through a process of 64 surgeries, human donor skin, pig skin, synthetic skin, my own skin. It was a mammoth like game of snakes and ladders, 2 steps forward and at time back. 3 steps back, sliding down that snake again. And then you're having to kind of fight back on the ladder. And it was, without going into the nitty gritty, it was a horrible, protracted, arduous journey of physical and mental recovery to come back from, massive third.
The doctors and nurses, they must have you're being surgery on, I don't know, on a daily basis and operations and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I remember in Chelmsford, you asked me the question. So they brought me the mirror, and this was like 6 months on, and they said, look,
we've got to get... the accident, or?
Yeah, no, 6 months after, and after the incident, and they brought me a mirror, and I think they were trying to rouse me from this state of drug-induced kind of coma, because that had been going on for like practically 6 months. And they were now starting to look at titrating, the doctors call it, so adding sort of diluent or diluting the analgesia that they keep you under and they keep you sedated. So they add some some substance to sort of draw that out, if you will, and they can wake you, in other words, to with the titration of the drug, and you're suddenly awake and you're kind of fairly compos mentis and you're able to have a conversation. Not that I remember the early sort of 6 months, but I do remember sort of like the aftermath when it started to rebuild, and I'm now stepping down now on the ward from being ICU and drug induced and all the rest of it. And they opened the window, I think, in a bid to try to give me that sort of rude awakening and try to motivate me, to get me to sit up in bed, that kind of thing. And I was a bit rude and perhaps telling the nurse what for. And she brought me a mirror and said, "I've got to get you to look at yourself now." And it was just hideous. I mean, this is me like 17 years of healing and everything's settled down a lot and, I'm healthy again. But, I mean, back then, my God, I mean, my face was like, it looked like twice the size. It was like swollen, blotchy, red, kind of raw sort of skin grafts.
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
disparity between what was original skin and skin grafts was really quite dramatic and shocking, really, to the eye. I mean, I looked shocking to myself, let alone God knows what other people must have
How
thought.
was you, Jamie, when obviously the nurses said to you, "Look, here's the mirror"? 6 months on, was you, I don't know how ready anyone can be, because obviously the injuries that you've suffered.
You're never really ready for that moment, not the initial sort of like check yourself out, there's been some change.
And you
type
know
moment.
yourself, obviously, what you sustained, them injuries.
Well, I mean, looking back, I mean, there's an instant sort of grieving process that kicks in when you see yourself, because you're pinching yourself thinking, well, this is definitely, I'm not going to wake up here from a nightmare. This is for real, right? And you've got to deal with it. You've got to face the music. And that is a tough thing. I mean, don't forget, I'd gone from being that bad guy who was all singing, all dancing, athletic, capable, high speed, a very capable young man, soldier, like athlete. And I was quite a good looking fella. I mean, it's not for me to sort of sit there and sing my own praises, but I wasn't a bad looking guy. I had normal ears, I had a decent head of hair, and I didn't have like kind of scars going on, and I hadn't lost any tissue, where the surgeons were forced to snip off big chunks of my ear. So I looked normal by all accounts. I've said this, I could walk into a bar, have a conversation with people quite confidently, guys and girls, and perhaps, get talking to a nice young lady that caught my eye or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, I was not confident. And now I was very deeply worried about the future and whether I was ever going to be able to have such a conversation again.
Going out into society and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Whether I could even show my face, whether I could,
people looking and stuff like that. I mean, you think, for you as a person, what you've gone through, and you're on the road to recovery, and it's something that you probably don't think about, because what you're thinking about is getting yourself back to back to normal. It doesn't come into, you're trying to overcome all these obstacles in the road, and the last thing you want to be thinking about is when you want to go to shops, what you want to do, normal routines. But then you're also probably, you don't think about it, but then people out in society, when people look, and that's people do, you know what I mean? And did that go through your mind when you've obviously got through all that?
I get that even to this day. I mean, this is me like 17 years on. I'm obviously a standout guy. I sort of joke about it. It's a bit like being a B-list celebrity. I walk down the street and people will look and they'll look again as if to say, that guy looks different. So it's part of who I am. It's part of my identity.
But that's for you as a person, as an individual. That's what I said. You're strong. I don't know. There's many strong people in this world.
You have to be. This is a case of you have to be. You sink or swim. Remember, I think as a young kid, I had to be that kind of stand-up kid where I was going to pull the socks up and get on with it, right? Or I was going to sink
Go down
that sort of that low road, which I didn't want to take. This was no different in essence. I had to kind of rise to the challenge of the new me. This was now Jamie version 2.0. I had to take it on the chin. I had to learn to accept it. If I didn't accept it, there was going to be no future path for me, no road to potentially climb. You have to accept it to be able to march on and to then go on and do the things that you might have fresh idea and ambition towards, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have to accept it. And that was vitally important. It was crucial for me to accept.
That
It
seems
took about 5 years, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
And there were periods where I wanted to check out. And there was periods of desperate depression where I didn't feel worthy of society anymore, and maybe society wasn't right for me anymore, or whatever. I was all sorts of questions running through my head.
Did you ever have suicidal thoughts?
I did, and I definitely considered all of that. I considered all of the above without getting into the sort of darkness of that. I considered it, and I even considered perhaps the softer approach of drug-assisted suicide. And I know that comes up in the media a lot. And I think perhaps for the most valid cases, it's probably not a bad thing especially if people are terminal.
Was that going abroad to do it, Jamie, or?
Yeah, I would have considered going to Switzerland and perhaps taking the softer route of, a super barbiturate sort of down the hatch. We're talking about a very much a controlled sort of prescription-only type substance.
Yeah.
But, thank God that I did not go down that road, and I managed to pull myself out of the oblivion that I was in. But that period rather lasted for several months of my life. There's no doubt about that. And that didn't kick in probably until about a year and a half, because I was still large, concentrated areas of open wound, and I was losing the will. I was losing the will to live, losing the will to fight, and frankly, I just didn't want it anymore. So I considered definitely, just effectively checking out of planet Earth if it was at all possible. It wasn't that easy for me at the time, and fortunately, I was able to pull back and turn a corner, And
I think how you've described your life, and before we've got to, surviving the plane crash, you seem to have had this fire in your stomach. I know it sounds a little bit, what's the name, to what's gone on and that, but I just think you've got that. You're a leader, you don't give up, where, let's be honest, the injuries sustained, anybody who's having to go through what, the operations, the treatments every day, who wouldn't give up?
It would have been very, very, very easy for me to give up. I had to practically talk myself out of not giving up every day for the early years of my recovery. And then fortunately now, I live a strong and productive life once again, and I'm happy to wake up and consider the day ahead, like in the normal sense. But that is a big transition to go through.
That's unbelievable.
And I think that hopefully hope for a lot of people that no matter how dark and difficult life may seemingly become because of whatever circumstances you're facing, there is, in theory, always hope. But I've said it before, you have to be hungry for a process, and it's how much do you want it. You have to sometimes dig exceptionally deep within yourself to find that sort of that newfound fire and that
inner
newfound
belief
motivation.
in it.
For sure. And you mentioned like the fire in the belly, but that is so important I think in everyday life, because that's ultimately what separates mainstream society, really. I think if you've got real fire in your belly, you can live by that, and you can go out there and you can still do things. You can still pick yourself up, and you can still have ambition, and you can still achieve. I was a broken man, and I came back from the darkest kind of depths of despair and being quite broken, and it isn't so much of a boast, but I was still able to go on and achieve some ambition that I had. I just had to kind of reinvent myself a little bit, because I couldn't quite be the same guy that I was. So, for example, I was never going to be that same sort of badged special forces soldier anymore. Those days were done. But I could go on and retrain, and I retrained, for example, as a mountain leader. I actually retrained as a pilot, but I sort of did more sedate stuff as a balloon pilot. I retrained as a diver and as an instructor, and I climbed the ladder to becoming a PADI course director. And there's not many in the world that can say that they've done that.
After what you've endured, to even get on a plane, and it's just the fear, or you know, that's that thing about you. You've got that thing between your teeth where, you know, you've been the lot. I don't think you could get any lower. Do you know what I mean? What you
I don't
said.
think you can get any lower, and I've often thought about this. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to take it away from anybody that's been through trauma, and there are many. I have many friends, many colleagues through, certainly with my role as ambassador for Health Heroes charity. So I know many guys that have been injured in the war zones, and they might have lost limbs. In some cases, I've got good friends that have lost 3 limbs.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Josh Boggy, who now works for the Invictus Games team office. And he's a remarkable character because he had the fire in the belly and he wanted to reinvent himself. He couldn't be the soldier that he was with, I think he was 9 Squadron, sort of para red sort of engineers back in the day. And he was an elite soldier. He couldn't do that anymore because he lost 3 limbs. But he was able to reinvent himself. He retrained, he became a diver, he did charity work, he became a speaker. He now works for Invictus Games office. Remarkable.
Yeah.
Fire in the belly. If someone like that can do it, if someone like me can do it. I know guys that have spinal injuries and they're in wheelchair. From a gentleman that was in a motorcycle accident in the south, Luke Delahunty, good friend of mine in the south of England. Luke was sadly, broke his back in a severe motorcycle accident, sports bike back in the day on a country lane, and he was run over and it damaged his spinal cord. And but Luke's gone on to do all manner of charity events and speaking and inspiring countless audiences. And it's having the passion to do new things and to try new things.
Yeah.
And not be afraid to put your toe in the water.
But it's like you've rebuilt your life, and you've gone into schools, you workshops, you do after dinner speaking, you do business mentoring seminars. You've just you haven't felt sorry for yourself, and I've gone back out there, and you're in the mix, and
I
it's
think
great to
what I will touch
I mean?
on, we all have days. Even now in my life, you might wake up one day and you don't feel so good. You're a bit tired from the days preceding or whatever. You're not quite so motivated. You might have your blue days, and the saying goes, you get out of bed the wrong side. I still have days like that. We all do. That's normal. That's human being.
Yeah.
But largely speaking, I have goals, and I like to sort of work towards goals, and I like to set tasks, and I might decide that I want to go and travel somewhere and see somewhere new. Take a meeting, go and talk to someone if you're feeling a bit down. Go and have tea, go and have coffee. Just do things that make you feel better about yourself. I like to walk. I like to hike. I love swimming. I go swimming quite regularly. That gives me a bit of a lift. If I can get away and do my scuba diving in the tropics, I love that. But it's not always easy living in the UK. But I definitely would say, look, you need to work at general mental health and physical health well-being.
Yeah.
You need to nurture that. You need to want that, and you need to kind of be hungry for like an ongoing process of like development. And my take on this is, I fought back, and I'm a version 2.0 of me, I would hasten to say, because I'm definitely not the original guy, and I can't be that original guy, in the same token. But if I was able to reinvent, and I'm able to nurture my health going forwards, then there's always hope. And you realise that life's definitely worth living. And we definitely have our dark times and our blue days, but it's definitely worth living, and there's always new opportunities ahead if you have that kind of attitude.
People watching this, I know people will watch it. Your story's it's just one that you wouldn't think it was real, and to go through what you've gone through and how you've overcome everything, the operations, the treatments and everything, and then to go on and do the things that you're doing. You're just a living example of someone who does never ever give up, and you give hope to people, and I think people will take a lot from that, because like you said, people have different types of trauma, and you're just a living example, and we're so grateful that you've come on to our podcast to share your story, because it is tough reliving what you've gone through, and you're rebuilding your life like every day, but I just find you're an inspirational, outstanding person. I really do, and I think honestly, anyone comes across this podcast will look at yourself and go, "Fucking hell, look at that guy there." Do you know what I mean? We think we've had it tough, and it's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable, mate.
No, I appreciate that, Tony. I mean, I think bottom line is, in all sincerity, when you try to nail it, the bottom line for me, look, my message to everybody out there is no matter how tough it gets, no matter how difficult your days are, ultimately with great will and determination, you can overcome life's obstacles. And that is my bottom line. You have to want it.
That's unbelievable. Your book, Life on a Thread, What Doesn't Kill You, Your Story. How hard was it to relive it?
It was pretty tough. I mean, I went through that process over about a 2-year period. I sat on the fence for about 10 years before I wrote it. Many people encouraged me to write the story because they'd heard it, and I'd been doing speaking for schools, to community groups, to SMEs, small businesses, to large corporate companies and so on. And a lot of people would come up to me, from the mainstream public to even journalists on occasion, would come up to me and sort of encourage me to write.
You got a book, or have you?
Yeah. And I did sit on the fence about it. I thought, I don't know, I don't know if I'm motivated. I don't know if I want to go there, like you touched on. Why would I want to really revisit all of that? But then the more that I thought about it, and that with the more encouragement that I had, the more that I felt that was perhaps a good reason enough to do it. So I'd like to think that a lot of people do or have taken a lot from it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been fortunate that I've sold many thousands of copies, and I've had some amazing feedback as well from people around the world, from different countries.
Where can people buy? Can people purchase it?
It's widely available on all sort of platforms, from sort of WH Smith to Amazon.
Amazon, yeah.
And even Waterstones have got it on the shelves there. So you just have to go in and ask for it, yeah, or indeed search Life on a Thread, Jamie Hull, yeah.
So Jamie, what's in the pipeline for yourself? Have you got what's coming up, or is there anything you can tell us? Or
well, I had a wonderful experience over the summer. Obviously, I'm a keen diver that I've mentioned, and I love to give a little something back if I can. I've been diving 29 years already, since I was that young dive master in Australia on the Barrier Reef. And I still love my diving, but it's lovely to see the rewards in other people. And this summer, I had a really great opportunity to go to Ottawa area in Canada, Ontario. And I worked with a small charity called Freedom at Depth. If people are interested, they can Google it. And the gentleman that runs that charity is an absolute legend in my book. So he works with people that have got paraplegia, quadriplegia. So they've been paralysed from sort of chest down, or even sort of neck down,
yeah,
in serious accidents. And I worked with a young NBA star that had just had a serious car accident, and he was 19 years of age, a gentleman called Sebastian, and he really inspired me. And I had the great opportunity to be able to nurture him in the water in Canada with a specially adapted disabled diving boat,
yeah,
in the St. Lawrence River. This was in Brockville, Ontario. And it was just a joy to be working in the river system. We're diving sort of 30 meters, good visibility. The current was ripping at like 6 knots, and I'm working with a guy that's paralyzed from the neck down. I mean, it was just phenomenal. So I would like to give a little something back, perhaps every summer, if I can work it, and at least give a couple of weeks. I still do my speaking, and I enjoy that. I enjoy speaking to different audiences and sharing a story of ultimately hope and sort of endeavour, and pass that
inspiration.
And I love to hike. So I'm actually going to go to Norway soon, and I'm going to be doing a bit of hiking, and I'm really looking forward to that. Keep an open mind, see where the road takes me, and just live my life, try to stay healthy, and
and keep traveling. You love a good what's the name? I love a good journey abroad and stuff. And listen, Jamie, I just want to say thank you so much, for giving your time up today. I know you're busy, and I just want to say you're an inspirational person, and I just want to say thank you for sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly with us.
You're welcome, Tony.
Thanks you so much. Thank you.
Yes.